Alrighty, everyone. It is Monday, June 30th, 2025. I am Michael Winkler, and this is the Mike Wink Show. We're going to start up today with part 2 of the goalie story. So for just a little bit of context, I play on a couple of co-ed recreational adult hockey leagues. And for one of our teams, we had a consolation playoff game for our final game. We didn't do very well in the seeding for the regular season and didn't do well in the first playoff game. And so our second playoff game was a consolation game with one of the other teams that hadn't done so well in the division. And so the game didn't matter at all. And so me and the goalie decided we were going to switch places without telling anybody. We're going to show up real early to the locker room, switch bags, and just start getting ready and just, see how it goes. And I'm going to play goalie. I had played goalie maybe 2 or 3 times when I was like 12 years old when I used to play roller hockey. But had never played ice hockey goalie, and it had been well over 10 years since I had done roller hockey goalie when I was like 12 years old. So getting into the locker room, it was clear some of the people were not happy when they realized what was happening, including the coach, our captain of the team, David, who kind of handles all the organizing and kind of decides what lines of people are going out and playing for the game. Like, oh, you're playing forward, you're playing D and whatnot. He did not look happy. He did not look pleased. And apparently he told one of our other players after the game, or he told the goalie that I switched with after the game, that like, he was telling him, oh, well, I just would have liked to know and to ask the other players because they're paying too and blah, blah, blah. And David, the goalie I switched with, was just like, fuck him. I don't care. Like, it's the last game of the season. Like, we're playing one of the other worst teams. Like, who cares? I did feel a little bad at first, to be honest, when I realized that people were a little bit upset. But it just put more pressure on me to do well, because if I did well, then it would make up for all of it. It wouldn't matter. Yeah, a couple people didn't look happy, including the captain. But by the end of the first period, I come to the bench to get some water, and they had changed their tune completely. They were all like, oh, actually, this isn't too bad. You're doing all right. We were up 3-1 at the end of the first. We were down 5-3 after the end of the second. So I let him 4 goals on the other side of the rink. And then the third, we were down 5-3 going into the third. We scored one early, so it made it 4-5. And then we scored one more with like 5 minutes left in the third or so. So now we're tied up 5-5, and I am panicking at this point because, like, obviously I wanted us to tie it up. When we're down 1 or down 2, I'm like, oh guys, come on, get some offense going, tie it up and whatnot. But also it's a double-edged sword because I want them to tie it up, but also now all the pressure's on me. We have 5 minutes left in the game, and it would be absolutely tragic if I were to end this goalie, this one-time goalie experience with letting them score with like 1 minute left to win by 1. Like, it would be fine, but that'd be a super annoying way to have this end when like a win or a tie or something is so close. But I managed our team played really good D for those remaining 5 minutes. I don't think I faced really any shots at all or any good ones. They did have a breakaway with 20 seconds left in the third. Their best players coming in solo, 1v1 on me. And I'm backing in. He's kind of coming in the right side. And so he makes a move to the left, and I just go for the full-on dive poke check, just like full-on dive. And I managed to get him to go I forced him to go wide enough around the net that he maybe could have put it in the net a certain percentage of the time, but it was not an easy shot, and he ended up missing the net and putting the puck behind the net, and we ended up getting it out of there. So we went to a shootout, my first ever ice hockey goalie game ever. We went to a shootout. And we won. I was facing the first shot. I stopped it. I went for the diving poke check again, basically. The guy came in really slow, went for a move to the side, and I just went for the dive poke check and got him. Our first guy up on the shootout scores, and then the next guy comes in, and I do the same thing. He comes in real slow, tries to make a move to the other direction, because I think they could tell from the game that, like, I was okay facing the shot straight on, but, like, once you got me on the ground, it got me moving around. I was not very good. And so I think they were purposefully trying to make a move on me more than take a shot in the shootout. But he tries to, the next guy tries to make a move the other direction. I go for the diving poke check and stop him. And then our second guy goes up and scores, and we won in a shootout. And I was grinning ear to ear, man. Even now I'm smiling just thinking about it. It was so much fun. It was way more physically exhausting than I ever would have expected. Like, I knew it was going to be tiring. Like, I didn't think it was going to be a cakewalk, but I also didn't think it was going to be that hard. I mean, I normally play center. I'm skating up and down the rink as hard as I can all game, and the goalie, for the most part, I know he has to get up and down and he moves a little bit, But for the most part, he's standing there. And like, I know wearing a whole bunch of gear and stuff is a little bit harder, and you know, you're going to get tired a little bit quicker, but I didn't think it was going to be anywhere near as exhausting as it was. I mean, by the end of the first, I was, and also as sweaty as it was, that gear is so sweaty. And I was thinking, like, as I'm putting on the gear and I'm in the locker room, I'm like, yeah, it's sweaty, but like, I'm in the locker room. Like, on the ice, it'll be better. But the problem is, even on the ice, it's not better, because as a goalie, you're mostly standing still. I mean, you move a tiny bit around your net, but like, for the most part, you're not moving. And that airflow when you're on the ice is what keeps you cool when you're a player, because you're suited up in thick layer of gear all around your body. So when you're moving on the ice as a player, that airflow keeps you cool, but as a goalie, it doesn't. And so you're just standing still in this sauna of gear, and the ice is doing nothing for you. And so I have to, like, but on stoppages of play, skate around like this as a goalie, trying to get as much airflow as I can, because I'm absolutely melting. I think I sweated more by the end of the first playing goalie then, a couple days ago, than I normally do by the end of the third playing center, skating up and down the rink. And so it was a really fun experience. We're talking about already doing it again for our other team if we get a good opportunity with a game that doesn't matter. You know, maybe our seeding's already determined, or it's a consolation playoff game in a similar scenario. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And they said I exceeded all expectations, which, you know, is just the cherry on top. You know, even if I would have done poorly, I think it would have still been fine, and I still would have enjoyed the experience and whatnot. But winning in a shootout was a really fun way to have that happen. I did almost exactly like I thought I would. My skating is pretty decent, so even though I'm in a bunch of big bulky gear, I still could kind of skate around all right when I was on my feet. And I was all right with my glove, like my left side glove hand. I was pretty good. I was making some decent glove saves. It was the moving around on the ground that was killer, right? I'd be up there like this, you know, stick in this hand, glove in this hand like this, and then I drop down to my knees in the butterfly position, where you've got your legs spread either way. And when you're down in that position, you're supposed to use like your skate blade to push off so that you can kind of slide on the ground while you're still in that butterfly position. But for me, it felt extremely unnatural to do that push-off move. Like, everything felt natural, like backing up, getting position on the player, dropping into butterfly to make the save. But it was like you drop butterfly to make the save, then the puck would move to the other side of the net or something, and you'd need to like shift over. It was that shifting over when you're already on the ground. That push-off just felt so unnatural, and I just basically couldn't do it. And so I'd make the drop, and then I'd just be like scrambling, just like, just grabbing everything, grabbing the post and pulling myself over, doing anything I can to move over to that side of the net, because I couldn't push off properly. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So a number of states have been trying to restrict access to pornography in their states. Texas is one of them. They implemented some kind of law that basically told the porn sites, hey, you have to verify the age of people who are trying to access your sites using like actual documents like their driver's license or some sort of like actual physical document that they have to submit to these porn sites. And the porn sites in response said that's a humongous security concern, along with the money that it would take to invest in this sort of project. We're just going to block access to the website in your entire state. And so for a number of years now, porn sites like Pornhub and most of the major porn sites have been blocked in Texas. And the only way to access them is by using VPN services that hide where your network is coming from and make it seem like you're accessing the site from a different country or something. I think a number of other states have been trying to do similar things. For a long time, it was tied up in the court, and they weren't sure exactly where it was stood. I think a ruling was made, and then appeals were made. But it seems like the Supreme Court officially said that it is okay for Texas to do this sort of thing just a few days ago. An ideologically divided Supreme Court on Friday affirmed a Texas law that requires users to verify their age to access porn sites, the first major legal test of statuses in 24 states aimed at protecting young people from lewd content that has become ever easier to view. In a 6-3, it's super annoying how like authoritarian people who want to like restrict adults' access to reasonable things like porn or weed or whatever use children as like the excuse for restricting it, when really it's just like they don't like porn. Like they are trying to, this is a pure lie, right? These people just don't like porn and don't think it should be accessible. Their reason is not like some super altruistic, deep-seated, oh my God, there's an epidemic of kids accessing porn or whatever, and it's this huge big problem. That is actually not the place they're coming from. They're working backwards from their conclusion of porn bad. We don't think people should have access to porn. What is the justification we can get the most people behind for this sort of thing? Oh, it's the protecting children. It's the pearl clutching. In a 6-3 ruling, the justices rejected arguments from the porn industry that the law violates the First Amendment rights of adults to access explicit content online because it required users to share identifying information that could be sold, misused, or hacked. The court's 3 liberals dissented. Advocates for the law hailed the ruling as affirming a powerful tool for keeping children away from a flood of adult material to which they have ready access in the age of the smartphone and tablet. What I would say is that's on the parents, though, right? You probably shouldn't be giving your 5-year-old a tablet or a smartphone with unfettered. You shouldn't be giving them a smartphone or a tablet, period, I would argue, but especially one with unfettered access to the internet. And so I would argue that it is very much your duty as a parent to implement some sort of parental restriction on devices that you give your children. And I would maybe even be willing to go a step further and say children who have been harmed as a result of their parents not putting these restrictions on devices they've been given could be themselves subject to some sort of penalty as a result of, basically they're not taking care of their kids. They didn't put a penalty restriction on it. Their kid got hurt or harmed in some sort of way. The parents I may be in support of punishing the parents in that scenario. Opponents said it could open the door to a broader range of sites requiring users to hand over sensitive biometric information or government identification. Justice Clarence Thomas, who wrote the majority opinion, found that age verification law has only an incidental effect on protected speech. The power to require age verification is within a state's authority to prevent children from accessing sexually explicit content, Thomas wrote. In dissent, Justice Elena Kagan, joined by Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, said while it was a reasonable goal to try and protect minors from lewd material online, that could be accomplished with tools that don't trample on adults' rights. Exactly, yeah. This, just like any piece of legislation, the pros and the cons need to be weighed against each other, right? I mean, there is very few pieces of legislation that are perfectly clean and that you couldn't find any sort of criticism for. Weigh the pros of protecting kids from accessing these sites or whatever versus the cons of restricting tax-paying regular adults from being able to easily access this thing that they want to be able to access. Anti-pornography and online child safety advocates cheered the court's decision. The SCOTUS ruling upholding Texas's law creates important precedent establishing that age verification is a constitutional way to prevent children from accessing pornography online, said Danny Pinter of the nonprofit Center on Sexual Exploitation, formerly Morality and Media. This ruling paves the way for other states to pass similar legislation and will have a profound positive impact on preventing children from being exposed to pornography online. They act like kids accessing pornography is actually the end of the world, which it's not ideal and you don't want it to happen. And we have age restrictions on pornography for a reason, but also they don't need to pretend like it ruins the kid's life or something. They're pretending like it's a meteor falling out of the sky. Free speech and online privacy advocates, meanwhile, reacted with dismay. The ruling overturns decades of precedent and has the potential to upend access to First Amendment protected speech on the internet for everyone, children and adults alike, said Samir Jain of the nonprofit Center for Democracy and Technology. Age verification requirements still raise serious privacy and free expression concerns that should be expressed before states move forward with these laws, he added. Jess Mears, a law professor at the University of Akron, said the ruling in Free Speech Coalition Inc. v. Paxton greenlights censorship tools that could end up chilling online speech more broadly. Offline, showing your ID to buy beer, lottery tickets, or fireworks is trivial, Myers said. Online, it means handing over your biometrics or driver's license to a random website and risking your privacy just to access legally protected speech. Yeah, that's the reason why a number of these sites refuse to even set up this sort of system, because they realize, I think they realize the PR and subsequent negative profit harm that they could get from that was greater than the profit loss of actually losing the entire Texas clientele, or the Texas clientele that's not willing to use a VPN, because I'm sure there's still plenty of people in Texas accessing Pornhub and these porn websites. They're just doing so through a VPN. argument. And also, I think children, people under the age of 18, more so than adults, probably know what VPNs are, right? I would imagine that the tech literate children are more familiar with the concept of a VPN and what it can do for them than the 60-year-old lawmakers, the Republican lawmakers passing this sort of thing. The Texas law requires age verification for any site where more than 1/3 of the content is sexual material harmful to minors. Users must submit digital identification, a government-issued ID, or other forms of proof that they are 18 or older. The law bars the sites from retaining identifying information, but it does allow them to transfer the data for verification purposes. It's not, even if they don't store the data, though, there are still humongous security concerns with doing this sort of thing. Pornhub, one of the world's most popular adult sites, is among the plaintiffs challenging the law. In response to statutes in Texas and elsewhere, Pornhub cut off service to states requiring age verification, blocking access to the site across much of the South. The porn industry plaintiffs, who formed an association called Free Speech Coalition, sued to block the Texas law before it went into effect in 2023. Derek L. Schaefer, an attorney for the coalition, argued that the lower court ruling allowing the law could open the door to an emerging wave of regulations that imperil free speech online. He told the justices that young people should be prevented from accessing porn, but that there were less intrusive ways of doing that than age verification. He suggested that educating parents and using content filtering software were better routes, but Justice Amy Coney Barrett pushed back on that, citing her own children. Oh, I'm gonna laugh. I have a feeling I'm gonna laugh really hard at whatever the heck she's about to say here. Kids can get online porn through gaming systems, tablets, phones, computers, Barrett said. Let me just say that content filtering for all those different devices, I can say from personal experience, is difficult to keep up with. Oh my God, stop giving your kids so many devices then. What? This seems like, oh my gosh. This is... I guarantee you if somebody made this exact same argument to her using some other piece of the government, she would call it ridiculous and be like, it's not the government's responsibility to take care of you and your children. It's your responsibility to do this. You're an individual, blah, blah, blah. The government's not here to handhold you or do things for you. That's what I'm going to give her the same response, right? The government's here not to handhold for you, right? It's your job as their mom to do all of this, to do these content filterings, to determine which devices are and aren't safe to give them, to ensure that they have an enriched life that isn't just glued to a tablet or whatever. That is your job, not the state's job. Another section of the law, which was blocked by a lower court, requires sites to post sexual material health warnings that make widely disputed claims that pornography is potentially biologically addictive and proven to harm brain development. I could totally believe that it is potentially biologically addictive. That, depending on how they define that, I mean, if it releases some sort of endorphins when you access porn, and the consistent, regular accessing of those dopamines, those hormones, is an addiction, then it is totally conceivable that it is biologically addictive. Now, to say it's proven to harm brain development, I think would require much more substantiation, and I think my gut would tell me that to the extent they could prove that, it would be very, very minor, and that they couldn't really make a causation argument there. They could maybe make a correlation. That one, the potentially biologically addictive, maybe makes sense to me. The proven to harm brain development, I don't know about. Sites that violate the law face fines of up to $10,000 a day. I will continue to enforce the law against any organization that refuses to take the necessary steps to protect minors from explicit materials. It is so annoying how they keep falling back on the protecting kids. It is such like a distraction. It is a humongous red herring. It is not what it is not what they care about at all. This is a religious decision. This is their religion tells them pornography is bad, and so therefore they think, oh, we need to impose our religious goals, ideals on the rest of society, and say, I don't think society should have pornography because my God says we shouldn't have porn, and if my God says me shouldn't have porn, then that means that the rest of us shouldn't have porn. And so they're just using the kids thing as like a distraction, because they know that they can get far more support from regular weirdos, from people who are apolitical or pseudo-political. They'll be able to drag more of those people over and trick more of them into siding with them than they will trying to get people on board with the idea that God is against pornography and that's why we should eliminate it. The ruling could bolster a broader push by children's safety advocates for laws aimed at protecting young people from a range of harms online. Several states have passed laws in recent years restricting minors' access to social networks or app stores without parental consent, some of which have been struck down by courts. And federal lawmakers in May reintroduced a bipartisan Kids Online Safety Act that would hold online platforms and social apps responsible for taking reasonable measures to shield children from inappropriate content. My understanding is that these websites already very much do that, though, right? Both from the perspective of they don't want the bad PR of showing kids adult content, but also from the perspective of making money, right? They make the most money when they show kids-centered content. They make the most money when they show adults whatever niche-centered adult content that they happen to be interested in. And so they have both a financial and PR interest of ensuring that kids do not access explicit content through their sites or whatever. That's not to say that it doesn't happen and that it's impossible to do so, but I would imagine, and I don't even think it takes speculation to say that they already are doing that, at least to some degree. It could also spur demand for software that lets people skirt those age checks, including minors who still want to see adult content and adults who want to do so without risking their anonymity. Yeah, I think this has already happened, right? My understanding is that as soon as they did this ban in Texas, or when it passed, that like the Google search results for VPN services went up like 300 or 400% or something crazy like that. And I would imagine that subscriptions from inside the state of Texas went up, maybe not to that extent, but they went up substantially, at least 50%. I would not be surprised. Those include virtual private networks, or VPNs, which allow users to route their internet traffic through remote servers. A user in Texas, for instance, could pose as one from Oklahoma or Canada to reach an adult website. Yeah, and my contention is that, I think children, the kind of people that you purportedly don't want to have access to these sites, are the ones that are going to be most savvy and most knowledgeable and most able to use a VPN or something like that to access these sites anyways. Free speech advocates lamented that the court applied a lower standard of First Amendment scrutiny than it had hoped it would. The legislature claims to be protecting children from sexually explicit materials, but the law will do little to block their access and instead deters adults from viewing vast amounts of First Amendment protected content, said Cecilia Wang of the American Civil Liberties Union, which was one of the groups representing the plaintiffs in the case. So yeah, I can't say I'm terribly surprised about all of this. I mean, this seems very much in line with how the Supreme Court has been ruling and acting over the last few years. Yeah, I worry about them doing this for other things too, right? If they can do this for pornography, why couldn't they do this for, say, violent video games or R-rated movies or maybe even something as innocuous as Family Guy that's T-rated or something, or that's like for PG-13 or something. I imagine that if they have gotten the green light to do this sort of thing, that it would be silly for these states not to continue to push the envelope. And I think I would expect, it would not blow my mind, and I'm giving a soft prediction that we're going to see either in Texas or some other state, we're going to see this same principle applied to restricting something else aside from pornography. And my first guess would be violent video games. It would not blow my mind if Texas implements some sort of rule that, to purchase a violent video game or whatever, an R-rated game, that you have to go through this age verification process. So apparently Hamas is starting to put bounties on American aid workers. GHF discloses 12 of its local staff members murdered by Hamas, others tortured in Gaza. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has disclosed that Hamas had placed bounties on American security workers in the enclave and that 12 of the organization's local staff members had been murdered in its latest update on the situation in Gaza. The GHF, an Israeli and U.S.-backed NGO, began operating in Gaza in May to distribute humanitarian aid. Hamas has placed bounties on both our American security personnel and Palestinian aid workers, offering cash rewards to anyone who injures or kills them, the Sunday GHF statement said. The aid organization acknowledges the reports that the Hamas terror group has been targeting its personnel, staff, and aid workers. It announced that 12 of its local staff have been murdered and others have been tortured. The targets of Hamas's brutality are heroes who are simply trying to feed the people of Gaza in the middle of a war, the GHF stated. Our U.S. security personnel, some of America's most elite and decorated veterans, are on the ground to protect people, and our local staff who keep these operations running have already paid the ultimate price. 12 murdered and others tortured, and now more threats emerging by the day, it continued. The GHF added that in recent days, Hamas has also pre-positioned armed operatives near humanitarian zones in an effort to disrupt the only functioning aid delivery system in Gaza. Hamas is an enemy of the Palestinian people. While to some they have casus belli as a resistance group, they are very much interested in controlling and oppressing the Palestinian people for cynical, self-centered gains. Hamas is a terror group. Last week, the aid group urged the UN to publicly condemn the targeting of humanitarian workers in Gaza. But what is why would you urge the UN to do this? What is the UN publicly condemning anything going to do? Sure, do it, but what does that matter? Who cares what the UN condemns? Who cares if the UN does some finger wag? Do you really think Hamas cares if the UN finger waves at them? Come on now. Come now. It also called on the UN to partner with the group on a new system for getting food straight to Palestinian families, according to a letter delivered to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The time has come to confront, without euphemism or delay, the structural failure of aid delivery in Gaza. Johnny Moore, GHF's executive chairman, wrote in the 2-page letter seen by the Jerusalem Post. So yeah, I mean, Hamas, is a terror group. They are interested in oppressing and restricting the Palestinian people for their own cynical personal gains. Hamas is a terror group that would gladly see the destruction of Israel and the United States and the killing of all its people. And so nobody should be you shouldn't be on Hamas's side just because you may not like how Israel is handling certain things. With the way the Trump administration has been handling the situation in Israel, it has been just unashamedly backing the Netanyahu administration and has been released that AI slot video where they want to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East or whatever. And I would not surprise me if this sort of thing continues to ramp up. If the Hamas leadership and the Palestinian people are generally not very impressed with the way the Trump administration is handling the situation, and to that extent that they are even more angry than they were before. And it would not blow my mind if we saw an increase in this sort of thing. And I wonder at what point it would cause a problem, right? At how many American aid workers and GHF aid workers need to be killed before they start going, okay, guys, can we, when do we need to stop doing this, or when do we need to change our strategy or do something to inhibit Hamas from doing this in some other way? Israel imposes sweeping censorship on foreign media. The Committee to Protect Journalists expressed alarm Monday over new directives issued by Israeli authorities ordering international media to obtain prior approval from the military censor before broadcasting news from combat zones or missile impact areas in Israel. The move represents a significant escalation in efforts to control wartime reporting. What I don't understand about this, okay, is the Iranians are very well aware of where any missiles hit, any damage that is done, and the missile defense capabilities of Israel, right? It's not like they're actually hiding anything by not letting these videos go out, right? It's not like if the Israeli military prevented some of those missile strike videos from releasing that anything would have changed whatsoever at all. It would not. This is purely a PR tactic. There are, Israel is a Western-style democracy. Everybody has smartphones with cameras, and everybody's very quick to record these sorts of things. And so the idea that you could ever implement this sort of rule and actually expect it to be effective in restricting the access of, restricting the ability of Iran to see what kind of damage has been done is hilarious. And so I feel like this to me screams like just a pure PR attempt. This is a rank attempt at authoritarian control of the PR narrative surrounding Israel right now. The move represents a significant escalation in efforts to control wartime reporting. CPJ Regional Director Sarah Kuda voiced deep concern over the escalating efforts to suppress press freedom through censorship and intimidation, emphasizing that silencing the press deprives the world of a clear, unfiltered view of the reality unfolding in the region. Now, something I'll make very, very clear is that Iran is heavily restrictive over the types of especially foreign media, that can come in and do reporting on anything. And obviously that's horrible and much worse than this sort of minor, soft-hearted restriction that Israel is trying to do. The Union of Journalists in Israel also denounced the move. Opposition leader Yair Lapid criticized the decision, arguing it damages Israeli diplomacy and is unenforceable considering smartphone ubiquity. That's what I'm saying. Everybody has a smartphone and is very, it's just like it is in a place in Europe, or it is here, right? Everybody is affluent enough there to be very quick to record this sort of thing because they want to post it on their social media or whatever. These new directives present a significant challenge for international outlets. The International Federation of Journalists has condemned the disturbing wave of attacks targeting Palestinian and Israeli journalists and called on Israeli authorities to uphold press freedom. The Foreign Press Association also highlighted an unprecedented ban preventing foreign journalists from entering Gaza, which has severely hindered independent reporting. To me, that might make some sense. There might be some real legitimate argument for preventing or at least restricting to some degree the kind of reporting that goes on in Gaza. You don't want just anybody and their mom trying to get in there because it is a war zone, and it's also a war zone with a terrorist group like Hamas that is very much incentivized to try and kill or capture any white people they can get their hands on. On June 18th, Israeli Defense Forces censors issued an order requiring anyone broadcasting the aftermath of Iranian attacks on Israeli military sites to obtain prior army approval. The order extends to individuals posting on social media accounts. Communications Minister Shlomo Kari and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir informed foreign journalists via email that all live and recorded coverage must be granted written approval from the military censor. Written approval? Yeah, okay. That means that to me, the fact that they must be granted written approval from the military censor means that this is very much a PR stunt, because that is extremely onerous and time consuming and unnecessary, right? If they were actually interested in getting through as many good faith journalists, processing as many good faith journalists as they could through this system, they wouldn't have it be a handwritten approval from this one dude. Broadcasting location or descriptive information without military authorization will be considered a criminal offense. Police are authorized to confiscate equipment, revoke press credentials, and detain journalists or photographers who violate these rules. The ministers stated that these measures aim to prevent media chaos during wartime and ensure that freedom of the press does not override the security of our citizens and soldiers. They claimed the move follows successful coordinated enforcement against Al Jazeera and other outlets accused of violating censorship rules and endangering national security. The government press office clarified that approval covers both the location and how it is described. It would not blow my mind if this was specifically a targeted, they really were doing this to try and target places like Al Jazeera and AP. The Israeli government has long targeted Al Jazeera and AP and some other news outlets for being critical of how they've handled situations in Gaza and the West Bank and the region in general. So it's interesting that they mentioned Al Jazeera, the one that they're, accused of violating censorship rules. Yeah, it is not shocking in one teeny tiny bit that they do this sort of mildly cynical PR authoritarian control scheme where they're going to censor what kind of media gets out regarding military strikes. And then the first one they go after is the one that they've always disliked them for a long time and have tried to go after numerous times in various different ways, Al Jazeera. I'm not saying Al Jazeera is good. I think they have serious problems, but they are an international news organization, and maybe they're biased. I don't know, but they still have some amount of legitimacy for sure. So yeah, this seems like a sort of a pseudo-authoritarian PR stunt. This is to me, very clearly an attempt to try and control the PR narrative surrounding this war and the conflict in the Middle East right now. While theoretically you could come up with some steelman reasons why this sort of thing might make sense, and maybe you could come up with some steelman examples of where this might make sense, I think in the case of Israel, it seems kind of pointless because everybody has a smartphone, everybody is very quick to record, and so I feel like this sort of thing would be almost impossible to actually enforce, on top of the fact that I don't think it would actually do anything, right? I don't think you're actually going to say you were able to perfectly enforce this, and none of the footage from strikes on Israeli military facilities videos of it never managed to reach social media. is Iran would still very well know if they hit your military buildings or not, right? They have satellites. They have informants on the ground in Israel, I'm sure, right? I'm sure they would still know. Oh yeah, we hit their military base we were aiming at. We can see on the satellite. They would know, okay? It's not like doing this. I don't think this has any practical impact, even if it were properly enforced, and there's no way they can enforce it. This is just weird. This is just weird. Republican Senate tax bill would add $3.3 trillion to the U.S. debt load, CBO says. Where are the fiscal conservatives now, huh? The changes made to President Donald Trump's big tax bill in the Senate would pile trillions onto the nation's debt load while resulting in even steeper losses in health care coverage, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said in a new analysis, adding to the challenges for Republicans as they try to muscle the bill into passage. The CBO estimates the Senate bill would increase the deficit by nearly $3.3 trillion from 2025 to 2034, a nearly $1 trillion increase over the House-passed bill, which CBO has projected would add $2.4 trillion to the debt over a decade. The analysis also found that 11.8 million more Americans would become uninsured by 2034 if the bill became law, an increase over the scoring for the House-passed version of the bill, which predicts 10.9 million more people would be without health coverage. The stark numbers are yet another obstacle for Republican leaders as they labor to pass Trump's bill by his self-imposed July 4th deadline. Even before the CBO's estimate, Republicans were at odds over the contours of the legislation, with some resisting the cost-saving proposals to reduce spending on Medicaid and food aid programs, even as other Republicans say those proposals don't go far enough. Republicans are slashing the programs as a way to help cover the costs of extending some $3.8 trillion in Trump tax breaks put in place during his first term. So yeah, this is all... My understanding is that a large chunk of this bill is ways to just pay for the Republican billionaire tax cut that they're wanting to do. Basically, they're wanting to provide large amounts of tax cuts for wealthy people, and they'll throw a tiny bone at the working class people, so the dumb, brainless MAGA voter can just go, I got a 2% cut on my taxes, so he's doing a good job by my brain. But really, 98% of the benefits are going to go to the rich people, including most of the provisions in this bill, like them wanting to sell off tons of public lands and stuff. Like, who benefits from that? Not the average person. It's going to be the millionaires and billionaires who have the ability to exploit these changes in the laws. The bill ultimately advanced in a 51-49 vote, but the path ahead is fraught, with voting on amendments still to come. Still, many Republicans are disputing the CBO estimates and the reliability of the office's work. Yeah, okay, they always do this, right? They'll come up with some harebrained, really bad piece of legislation. The CBO or some other nonpartisan, independent organization will come out and analyze that and be like, hey guys, this is actually really bad. It's going to increase the debt. It's going to take people off health care. It's going to do whatever. And instead of taking that in stride and going, oh yeah, okay, maybe we should retool how we have this legislation written, or to maybe not have all these negative consequences. They just start crying because they don't care about the consequences. Their analysis to get them to this point is devoid from reality. So their conclusions that an independent organization would get from analyzing this sort of thing are devoid from reality. They legitimately do not care what any objective analysis says what this bill will do. All they care about is getting it passed for cynical reasons, and they're just going to cry. So now they're gonna cry that the CBO is not giving them that is somehow biased or something, when really the piece of legislation is biased towards being terrible, and the Republicans don't care. They just want to whine about it and try and obfuscate the point and trick dumb people into thinking that really the CBO is this partisan. The Republicans here are the altruistic actors. They're really just trying to pass legislation for you and me, and the CBO is controlled by the liberals and the Democrats, and they're there to stop them at all costs, even if it means lying. That's it's just. To hoist the bill to passage, they are using a different budget baseline that assumes the Trump tax cuts expiring in December have already been extended, essentially making them cost-free in the budget. Democrats and economists decry the GOP's approach as magic math that obscures the true costs of the GOP tax breaks. In addition to Democrats note that under the traditional scoring system, the Republican bill would violate the Senate's Byrd rule that forbids the legislation from increasing deficits after 10 years. In a Sunday letter to Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley, the top Democrat on the Senate Budget Committee, CBO Director Philip Swagel said the office estimates that the Finance Committee's portion of the bill, also known as Title VII, increases the deficits in years after 2034 under traditional scoring. Yeah, this should be a surprise to nobody that the Republicans, the Trump big, beautiful bill is not actually interested in fixing anything. And they're only interested in, this is all a cynical cash grab, baby. It's all about whoever can make the bag. How many bags can we make? How many bags can be made? All the rich people in on this, everybody's just here making a bag, man. But this isn't surprising at all. And it's also not surprising whatsoever that the Republicans are crying about the CBO, trying to pretend like the CBO is being biased or that this analysis isn't correct or something. They're just whining because that's all they have, right? Because their analysis is completely devoid from reality. They can't point to any facts or anything that would actually dispute the CBO's claims. All they have is crying and whining. Yeah, they're biased. Oh, the CBO is being so mean to me. Oh, they didn't like my tax bill that would increase the debt by $3.3 trillion. Oh, they're being so mean to me, guys. Oh, poor old me. The victim mentality on the Republican side is just absolutely pathetic. The real reason Trump is begging the Fed to cut interest rates. President Trump's calls to lower interest rates have intensified in recent days, and with good reason. Annual interest payments on the U.S. national debt have surged to $1.2 trillion over the past 12 months, highlighting the precarious fiscal state of the world's largest economy. Interest expenses have surpassed healthcare and defense spending by approximately $300 billion. Interest payments currently account for 18% of all federal tax revenue, just shy of the record 19% seen in the 1980s, when interest rates reached historic highs of nearly 19%. Washington's soaring interest payments are being driven by two key factors: persistent fiscal deficits and the Federal Reserve's reluctance to cut interest rates amid ongoing inflation concerns. Persistent fiscal deficits, yeah, that literally is how debts are born. You have $100 coming in revenue, but you spend $110 in liabilities, or you have $110 in liabilities, or you spend $110. That means that $10 is now debt. You do that over a number of years, then that accumulates over time. So persistent fiscal deficits is definitely a reason why the debt has grown to where it is and why interest payments are increasing. Many economists have warned that the deficit could grow even larger if President Trump's proposed big, beautiful bill is enacted. Given these risks, the president is unlikely to convince Fed Chair Jerome Powell to cut interest rates soon. President Trump's latest tirade against Fed Chair Jerome Powell came earlier this month when he took to social media to label Powell a numbskull and a dumb guy for refusing to cut interest rates. Trump argued that rates should be no higher than 2%, implying more than 200 basis points of cuts from current levels. He also claimed the U.S. has virtually no inflation and that our economy is doing really well. Powell, however, sees things differently. Following the Federal Reserve's recent decision to leave interest rates unchanged, Powell said the central bank is well positioned to wait. He warned of potential stagflation risks as economic growth slows and tariff-related inflation pressures return. Everyone that I know is forecasting a meaningful increase in inflation in coming months from tariffs because someone has to pay for the tariffs, Powell said during a press conference, noting that those costs will likely fall somewhere along the supply chain, whether on manufacturers, exporters, importers, or retailers. We all know this. This is not conjecture. This is not speculation. This is basic factual economics. We understand how tariffs work. They will tangibly, directly increase inflation. That's literally how they work. It is an increase in the cost. That is, by definition, inflation. The central bank's next policy meeting is scheduled for July 29th/30th, though traders expect that any meaningful chance of a rate cut may not materialize until the following meeting in September, according to CME Group's FedWatch tool. The September meeting will also unveil the Fed's latest projections for GDP, unemployment, inflation, and interest rates. Anytime I see Trump mad at somebody, my initial reaction is that they actually probably are the good guy and that the reason Trump's mad at them is probably really stupid. And this is absolutely a case for that. My understanding is that Powell has been doing a pretty good job at the Fed, that they have been continuing despite being appointed by Trump during his first term, that Powell has done a good job keeping the Fed independent and not capitulating to any of Trump's economical stupid demands, like lowering the interest rates or raising them when it doesn't economically make the most sense to do so. I've talked about this earlier. I'm very worried about what's going to happen in 2026 when Jerome Powell's term is up. When Trump said he's already been interviewing new potential Fed heads. I'm worried that he's going to put in some lunatic, some pure sycophant who maybe doesn't even have an economics degree or doesn't understand or have any experience in the field of economics, but that is just going to do whatever he wants him to do. And I worry the impacts that could have on the American economy at large are tremendous, right? I'm not going to be alarmist or a doomsday person or whatever, but like it would not blow my mind. This is one of the ways that the collapse of the American economy could theoretically happen, is if Trump implements some sort of stooge sycophant for the Fed chair head, and then they just do whatever he wants, and Trump's reasoning is completely devoid from economic reality. And so that is one of the ways that, in combination with us backing like a cryptocurrency or something, is one of the ways I could totally see the American economy just completely collapsing. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, but it is totally conceivable. All right, last story of the day. This one's a fun one. Republican lawmaker with ectopic pregnancy nearly died amid new Florida abortion laws, but blames the left. My understanding is that there's a Republican lawmaker who is very anti-abortion who got an abortion and is now claiming, but it actually wasn't an abortion. But it totally wasn't, guys, because I said it wasn't. Because it would be very, very inconvenient for me if it was. She didn't say that last part. That last part I added. Florida Republican Representative Kat Cammack has revealed that she almost died last year as a result of her state's 6-week abortion ban, which left hospital staff reluctant to treat her ectopic pregnancy for fear of criminal prosecution. Speaking to the Wall Street Journal, Cammack, 37, reported her experiences in an unnamed Florida hospital's emergency room on May 31st, 2024, when it was discovered that there was no way for her baby's embryo to survive and that her own life was in danger without action. A doctor discovered the embryo implanted where a fallopian tube meets the uterus, a cornual ectopic pregnancy, and frankly told the representative, if this ruptures, it'll kill you. But after deciding against surgery, the facility's doctors and nurses had to be persuaded to give her the shot of methotrexate she required to expel the pregnancy. That was because the state's 6-week ban had come into effect at the start of that month, causing staff to fear they could lose their medical licenses and be sent to jail if they gave her the drug, which blocks the flow of folic acid to the embryo to prevent its growth. An abortion. Cammack was only 5 weeks pregnant at the time. The embryo had no heartbeat, and her own safety was in jeopardy. But nevertheless, the Congresswoman found herself forced to pull up the letter of the law on her phone to argue the case, and even put in a call to Governor Ron DeSantis without being able to reach him before staff relented and came to her aid. I wonder if this is a case of, like, if it was anybody else, they would not have rendered her aid. They would not have given her the medicine that she needed. But because she's a lawmaker, because she happens to be friends with DeSantis or whatever, that she gets special treatment. I wonder if that's the case here. Surprisingly, given her ordeal, the representative does not feel the law itself is at fault and instead blames Democrats for scaring medical professionals into confusion over their responsibilities. Yeah, it's the Democrats that are totally scaring them into confusion about their responsibilities. Not literally the hospital's lawyers themselves saying, hey guys, we don't know if we should do this. It's the hospital's lawyers themselves that are doing this, not the Democrats that have convinced these healthcare workers that they shouldn't do it. That is a truly, truly insane thing to say. It was absolute fear-mongering at its worst, Cammack told the Journal, while acknowledging that reproductive rights activists might draw the opposite conclusion from her story. There will be some comments like, well, thank God we have abortion services, even though what I went through wasn't an abortion, she said. Yeah, because it's only an abortion when a Democrat or somebody you don't like does it. But when it's yourself or a Republican, no, can't possibly be an abortion. She doesn't even need to walk this back like she is too, right? Because she says that Florida has protections. It says, except in the case of rape, incest, or when the mother's life is at risk. It sounds like in this case, the mother's life was at risk. So she has a legitimate legal defense for doing this sort of thing, but like to pretend that this wasn't an abortion is just factually devoid from reality, right? You can argue that this was a legally justified abortion or even a morally justified abortion in however way you do your axioms and ideals work. To pretend that this wasn't an abortion is hilarious, is absolutely hilarious. Dr. Allison Haddock, president of the American College of Emergency Physicians, told the Journal it is becoming common for doctors in states that have restricted abortion access to worry whether their clinical judgment will stand should there be any prosecution. This has been a real stress point for a lot of our physicians, she said. Molly Duane, a senior attorney at the Center for Reproductive Rights, took issue with Kamek's argument that pro-choice activists were to blame for sowing confusion, pointing out that Florida's regulators had made it clear they intended to aggressively enforce their 6-week ban while also failing to define ectopic pregnancy within the legislation. I just can't get over the whole it's not an abortion because it's a Republican. I can't get over that, right? It's an abortion if anybody else does it, but because she does it, because she's a pro-life Republican, it's suddenly not an abortion. It's a medical procedure, totally normal one. The A word, the abortion word, doesn't come anywhere into the equation. It absolutely was an abortion. It seems like it's permissible by her own morals in saying that it was risking the life of the mother, which it seems like it was if it was a legitimate ectopic pregnancy, and that it was the right thing for her to get it taken out or whatever. But the idea that it wasn't an abortion is just way too convenient, man. It's just way too convenient. You can't have it both ways, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to choose one or the other, okay? This is so late. It's just so lazy. And like, I feel like politicians can get away with this sort of crap more than they used to, just because people are so busy now. On your smartphone, you have 5 different social media apps, all of which have a million different things. You're following a million people on blah, blah. Like, because there are so many more sources people get their media from, the idea that somebody pointing out this hypocrisy would break through to people it should doesn't happen anymore, right? Back when there used to be only a handful of TV channels and a handful of newspapers, this sort of thing would be a big deal because somebody would point it out they'd make an op-ed piece about this person being hilariously hypocritical. People would see it because there's only 5 newspapers and 5 channels or whatever, and they often share their stories a lot. And a big story like this tends to permeate it pervades into the public. But because media is so wide now that it is almost impossible for anything to penetrate that deep into the public. And so even if you are to correctly point this thing out, I guarantee you the amount, if you write an article about this, even in a highly published publication like New York Times or the Washington Post or something, if you point out this hypocrisy, only a very, very small fraction of Florida voters are ever going to see it and therefore ever care about it. I think people are able to get away with hypocrisy and lying more than they ever were in the past. It's almost like I've heard it described as like there's 1984 and then there's Brave New World, sort of on the media dystopian like landscape idea. 1984 is where on one side of the spectrum you have 1984 where the government heavily restricts what can be published and what can't be published, and there's a Ministry of Truth and blah, blah, blah. But then on the Brave New World end, you have the exact opposite, where there is such an oversaturation of everything, and there's absolutely no, like, truth-telling. There's nothing that distinguishes truth from fake, and that the ability to distinguish what is true and what is fake is almost impossible or very difficult or too onerous for the average person. So then it creates a scenario where you reach such a point of saturation that it is almost impossible to expect any regular person to access the correct information, and misinformation becomes an inherent part of the system. I think we're almost at that point now with where misinformation has become it permeates so much. it's just unavoidable. And that has become a serious part of our system, and that the ability for us to point out hypocrisy and liars and have actual tangible bad punishments for these things, like people not as for example, people seeing this sort of thing and not reelecting her as a result. I just feel like that sort of thing doesn't happen anymore. And it's not because kids are kids nowadays or something like that. I think it's more of a function of technology than anything else. Alrighty. That's all she wrote, folks. It has been Monday, June 30th. I am Michael Winkler, and this has been The Mike Wink Show. Peace out, y'all.